This is eCoffee with Experts, where marketers and founders share what's actually working in SEO, AI, and digital growth. Grab your coffee and fuel your mind as we chat with top minds about their wins, struggles, and lessons you won't find in a blog post. Brought to you by Digital Web Solutions, we bring real talk to help you grow your business, one episode at a time. Let's get started.
Hey, hi everyone. Welcome to your show, eCoffee with Experts. This is your host, Ranmay here. And today we have Dana, who is the president at Kickpoint with us. Hey, Dana, how's it going?
Good. Thank you so much for having me.
Lovely. Dana, before we move any forward, why don't you talk us through your journey a bit, how it all started? I mean, you have been in the SEO space for the last 25 years, but, how it all started, so many seasons, you'd have gone through so many Google updates. So give us a bit about your journey and we'll take it off from there.
Yeah, I started, I was freelancing building websites in 2000. And my first client said to me, why am I not on Google yet? And I said, I have no idea. I'll get back to you. And so from there, I found Rand Fishkin's blog. Before it was SEO Moz, it was a web design company. I can't remember the name of it. And just really fell in love with SEO. And so I did SEO basically full-time from then up until, about 2017, when I started getting more questions about analytics, because that was when I think really people were like, okay, this is, in the beginning, it was, oh, you have a website. Congratulations, you're already beating your competition. Just, we don't need to measure anything because no one else is competing with you. And then over time, obviously, the market gets saturated and now measurement starts to matter. So then I started to get into analytics. Turns out I really like analytics. So I do that now primarily full time. Although I obviously have this, deep expertise in SEO that I did for years and years and years. And yeah, analytics is now my full time focus. So it's been, as you mentioned, really interesting. I would say the biggest SEO, I think the first major one I remember is the Florida update. And, people were like, oh no, SEO is dead. So every time somebody says SEO is dead, I'm like, I've heard that before. It's not, SEO is not dead. Like as my friend Ruth Burr-Reedy said, people are still going to buy things on the internet. That is not going away anytime soon. So you can call it whatever you want, but the reality is our jobs are still putting things in front of people when they are ready to get those things. So that part of what we do, no matter what you call it, SEO or geo or any other ridiculous term, that's not going to change.
I'm glad you said it. You said the record straight. Lovely.
Mm-hmm.
And Dana, you recently spoke at the Brighton SEO, speaking at international conferences, how it kind of creates your own personal brand and what it takes to kind of be on stage, talk about topics. Talk us through about that experience a bit.
Yeah. So I started my first industry speaking engagement was in 2012 at SMX West, which doesn't exist anymore. And I was doing local SEO quite a bit then. And Matt McGee, who is still in the industry, but he focuses on realtors now, was hosting a panel on local SEO. And so I pitched it, I got it. And then from there, people were like, oh, yeah, she has something interesting to say. So I ended up doing a lot more speaking engagements from that point. But foundationally, I've always been good at breaking down complicated concepts and making it understandable. One of my very first jobs out of university was working for a company that made reporting software to make it easy for American companies to report to the EPA on emissions and pollution. Another company was a CRM company, and my job was to fly around all over the States and do training for those companies. And so that expertise of taking people who are not really excited about what we're learning, it's boring software. No one wants to use a CRM. No one's excited about reporting to the EPA, and just trying to make it entertaining but understandable for people who won't necessarily be using this all the time, I think really lended itself well to my teaching style. And I've been also doing a column on CBC Edmonton AM, which is like NPR for American listeners or BBC for UK listeners. And I've been doing a 5-minute live technology column every Monday for the past 13 years, which makes me really good at live radio. Just again, it's a lot of experience doing this stuff.
Lovely. And, you have been at leadership positions at multiple stages of your career. So which leadership mistake do you see, agencies repeat over and over when scaling their teams?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is scaling too fast. Certainly for us, we definitely grew quite a bit during COVID and then we scaled it back a little bit. And I think, I don't know if it was necessarily a mistake. I think it made sense at the time. But I think what I see other people when I talk to other agency founders and they're just tired, they're like, yeah, we have so many people and, and I think it's where you get to a point where you end up having to say yes to everything, even if you know that client's not a good fit because you got to pay everybody. And I think that's a really difficult position to be in, and it can happen when you scale too fast. But then the other side is, can I say yes to work to grow the agency when I don't actually have the people there? And how do I find the good people? And so I think that that's always a difficult spot. I was told pretty early on in my career, and I think this is true, when you hit 20, that's a real point. When you hit 50, that's a real point. And then when you get over 100, that's another real point in the agency. And the person who might be good at getting you to 20 isn't necessarily the person who's going to be good at getting you to 50 or to 100. And so I think it's totally okay to not scale your agency too. We're at about 15 now, and I think we're probably just going to stay here, and that's fine. That's a good, comfortable size for us. We like having that size of team. It just means that, for example, we don't take on a lot of retainer type stuff. And we like teaching clients how to do some things, because we can't necessarily be retainer to everybody, because, we're actually, we can't take on retainers, else we could never work with new clients. So I think that that's just realizing your strengths and weaknesses as an agency, and realizing like the things that you do well and the things that you're like, oh, I totally want to do this, but it's always frustrating every single time. I think that's important to remember as well.
Absolutely. And at what point, do you decide whether to say a yes or a no to a prospect? Give us an example wherein you have said no to any particular client.
Yeah. I mean, early on in the lead intake process, we'll ask people, what's your budget? And if they're being weird or cagey about it, or like, I'll tell you later, or my favorite is when they say, oh, well, the budget's unlimited as long as I'm getting results. That's not actually true. It's like that person. I mean, if they think that's true, it also shows that they don't necessarily have a good head for business, right? And so those are definitely some red flags. Part of it too is one thing I recommended, we've been doing this for a while, is having a 2-step process for intake for clients. So we used to call it discovery. We're finding that word is not resonating with leads as much as it used to, but like a review or an audit or something, just to go in and take a look and see what you've got dealing with. A lot of agencies will do this for free as part of the proposal process, get paid for that time, and then see what you're dealing with before you come to them and say, oh, it'll be $5,000 a month or whatever it is. But then at the same time, you can also get a sense of what the client is like and if you're a good fit. And maybe they want a different type of agency than you are. And maybe you want a different type of client than they are. And that is totally fine. And that's where, referring them off to somewhere else. So for example, if we're talking to a client and they're pretty obsessed with like, I want to make sure I'm getting #1 rankings for this specific keyword. Like, we are not that kind of agency. Like, yes, we'll get you rankings, but we're not obsessed with like #1 for this one weird specific keyword. There are totally agencies that will do that, and they're good at that. And I will happily send you off to them, but we're just not going to have a good working relationship. So I don't want to keep pursuing this if I know ultimately in the end you're going to be unhappy.
Lovely points there. I mean, like we say in SEO, right? It is a marathon. You win some, you lose some, and you have your strategies in place, right? You cannot be really specific about one keyword with, whatever that you've thought about, winning battles with that certain keyword, right?
Well, yeah. And the other thing too is because, you and I Google something and we're in different physical locations. We have different search histories, right? What is a ranking anymore? And it's, maybe it used to be true at some point in the past, when we still had the 10 blue links, but if an AI overview is coming up first, like, what is ranking anymore? And so I think that that's where it also shows like the sophistication of the client. If they're coming to you and they're still saying, I want to rank #1 for this. Well, what do you mean? What is #1? Like, what is, it's like Schrodinger's rankings, it either is #1 or it's not, but neither of us can tell without looking. And if we look, then it ruins the experiment. So I think that's something that I think is a real important point for agencies to make. And I don't know if clients are either they've caught up to it and they think that AI is so much more important in terms of traffic than it is currently, or they're still thinking about ye olden days of 10 blue links, which is not. That's never coming back. That ship has sailed. So I think it's important for agencies as well to educate clients and like the reality of ranking in 2025 and beyond.
Absolutely. Talking about that, Dana, you have lived through quite a few, eras of search, right? From 10 blue links to now AI overviews, which has disrupted search, I would say. So when you see the current SERP chaos, right, what is that one metric you trust more than anything else?
Well, I used to think impressions was not bad. But, as we record this, there's been the ranking apocalypse where Google stopped returning 100 results for ranking tools. And what's happened as a result is I've seen for most of our clients, the impressions get cut in half, which is actually really interesting to me. Like, I always knew, and I'd always communicated this to clients, that definitely some impressions that we saw in Google Search Console were the result of rank trackers, because the rank tracker has to have an impression to get that rank. But I thought maybe it was 25%. I didn't think it was 50%. And I'm routinely seeing it at 50% of clients. And then the other half of it is, and this is not a good metric with average position, is obviously going up because now we're seeing less of those searches. So everybody's average position is going up. Everyone's impressions are going down. And it's a completely artificial situation that's happening right now, which I think is actually a great learning moment for clients, and like how much of the metrics we depend on are completely interruptible by outside forces. And that it's like, what is the one metric that we can focus on? So often what we're thinking about is, what can we trust? And that would be our first party data, which is GA4, for example, or whatever analytics product you're using. Is it perfect? No, it'll never be perfect because people also have ad blockers. They can say no to being tracked, right? But out of that, you can certainly pick, these are the metrics that I want to focus on. And something else as well that I do like in GA4 is engagement rate. And engagement rate in GA4 measures that if you go to a second page, if you have that tab as your active tab or you convert, that makes it an engaged session. It's pretty much like table stakes. I think it's a decent metric for looking at how people are doing. So if you take a look, a simple report would be looking at landing page, looking at engagement rate. If there's some landing pages where you see a lot of traffic from organic, for example, it's got a low engagement rate, that's a page where maybe you have a mismatch in terms of what people are Googling and then ending up on your site, or the page itself isn't resonating with viewers. So that's not bad metric to take a look at if you just want something overall to give you a hallmark of quality.
Absolutely. And what is your take on AI summarization kind of impacting the way brands measure awareness nowadays if impressions no longer mean page visits now?
Yeah, I still think impressions are an important metric to look at, just because I think that does tell you something about how often you're coming up as a brand. But again, this is where, especially when we think about ranking tools that include things like AI, here's this search in ChatGPT, here's how often you come up. Those searches are guesses at what people might search for. It's, AI search is so personal and how people phrase things is so specific and different. And you'll end up with millions of different ways to say the same thing, that I don't think that the idea of a query is going to be the same when you extend it to AI search. Instead, there's going to be, groups of topics. And so I think as well, when you're thinking about how do I describe this, instead of going from a query, you're going to a topic group. And what is your authority for that topic group? Which almost feels like going back a little bit in search when we talk about topical authority. But I would say that that's, when you're thinking about, do we show up for these things? That would be what I would focus on, would be like, what's your general topical authority? Like, does ChatGPT think you know a thing or two about GA4, for example? Or, if somebody searches moving companies in Austin, does Claude know that you do that thing, or Perplexity? And so I think that's really what people need to focus on, is just making sure that they're educating the LLMs on what it is that they do. And clients that we've seen who do that LLM education certainly get more traffic from LLMs and AI overviews. The traffic that comes to our client sites via LLMs and AI overviews is typically higher quality. They have better engagement rates. They stay on the site longer. They're more likely to come back, and they convert at a higher rate. So the investment is there. And I recently did a webinar with SE ranking that I'm going to turn into a resource post on my website on analyticsplaybook.com about calculating the ROI of the effort that you've put in to make sure you rank in AI overviews. And then that way you can ask for more budget from your client, or internally if you're in-house, to spend more time ranking for AI overviews.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And finally, Dana, if you had to make that one bold prediction about the future of analytics plus AI, what is the headline we all be quoting 5 years from now?
I think people think they've got it bad now when it comes to not being able to record a lot. Just wait for 5 years from now. I think something that I've really been hammering home is analytics is not perfect. I did a whole talk about this at MozCon last year. Analytics is not perfect. It's never going to be perfect. So just record what you can and let go of what you can't. And I think that is only going to get worse and worse from here on out. Ad blockers, consent tools, these are not going away. And I think a lot of countries around the world are going to start following the EU's lead when it comes to things like GDPR. So I think that instead of complaining about people who say no to being tracked, I think you need to figure out another way to make that, to be able to make decisions based on incomplete data. And I think that trying to get around ad blockers, like certainly you could do server-side tracking, it gets you around some ad blockers, but ultimately, if somebody says no to being tracked, you can't track them. And so how can you still make decisions based on that incomplete data? That is what people need to be thinking about now. And in 5 years from now, I am sure we will have less data than we have now.
Agreed. Perfect, Dana. This has been a great conversation. But before I let you go, a quick rapid fire. All right. Your last Google search.
That's a good question. You know what? I'll actually go to my history for that. That is a good question. Let's see what it actually was. 1 second here. Let's look at my history. What did I search for on Google? I have lots of people, lots of other searches, but nothing on Google. What did I look for? I was looking for YouTube. I was looking at YouTube metrics. I wanted to know what a specific YouTube metric meant.
Okay.
Because I was looking up metrics for my own channel.
All right. Your next vacation.
I don't have anything specific booked right now, but usually my wife and I try to get away around Christmas time, and we'll go up. We call it going up island. So we'll go up further north on Vancouver Island, which is where I live.
Okay. Where do we find Anna on Friday evenings, after office or after work?
On Fridays, I'm usually playing World of Warcraft. Or I'm watching RuPaul's Drag Race. So those are my two things that I do on Friday nights.
All right. The last one. What did you do with your first paycheck, Dana? First paycheck of your life?
Man, I probably bought comic books. My very first, I was working at Wendy's, the fast food restaurant, and I'm pretty sure I took that first paycheck and I went and bought comic books with it because that was something I always wanted to have. And I still have a big chunk of my comic book collection. It's in the basement.
Thank you so much once again for taking out time to do this with us. Really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you so much.